So what things are on your mind? What questions do you have this morning? Go ahead and unmute, put it in the chat. They're all good. Mr.
Woo!
Wow.
We got some hot
Checkers.
hands. Love it.
Yeah.
Fletcher.
Mr. Fletcher, you're up.
Morning, everybody. I have a question because I do have some good news. I meant to shout it out, but you guys moved on faster than I could, so I should put it in here. I've hired the right people. I've got some really good people who it's taken a while to find. So we have been shifting from hire slow and fire fast. So we've got some really good people in our space. And so I'm now looking to move to start doing some leadership training for the people who have been working here already for the past 3 or so years. So they can start taking some of the newer people underneath them. And so when I'm looking for two things, one is what are you all doing for training your leaders to prepare to do at least the work at 70% quality and effort, as I would if I was there myself. And then on top of that, what are you all doing if you have staff? Because I do have somebody I just found out now because I got his background check, who maybe have a shaky background on how you making decisions on deciding to keep them on staff or not. So that's two questions, but the good news is I got somebody going to work today and I'm sitting down doing something else for a change. So this is great.
Hey.
Nice.
Love it. And I love this question, Fletcher, because it's like, it's not a burning fire. It's not like, oh my God, the world's on fire. What do I need to do? It's like, hey, I've got something good going here. Let's work on these little things to make it better. And that's a fun spot to be in as a business owner. Not saying that a burning fire won't come along. It always does. But it's fun to be saying, hey, what can I be doing better? Would love to get feedback from other clients on maybe what you've done with your team. And also if you have had somebody with a shaky past or history and how you've handled that. But as you guys are raising your hands, giving some feedback to Fletcher here, I'm going to put a link to a book in the chat. We don't make a habit at Redmond Growth here of telling you guys to read things, and I think sometimes trying to get your employees to read things is pretty tough too. But this book, it's leadership and self-deception. And if I could get every leader, or really if I could get every person to read this book, I think we'd all be better off for it. But it's really good when you're trying to build your team. It's a book here that all the coaches here at Redmond Growth have read, but I just put a link to that in the chat. It's definitely one that as a business owner, I would read it. And if you have anybody in your team who's looking to kind of develop some skills, I think it's a really good one. But what feedback do we have for Fletcher? What have you done to kind of build up leaders in your team? And also, what have you done if you have somebody whose maybe background check was a little bit shaky, but they're doing good work? Raise a hand, unmute, throw it in the chat. Jeff.
I've got a little bit of feedback. I just hired a project manager / superintendent. He's probably more of a superintendent, but he's out in the field. I hired him, I don't know, probably 5 or 6 weeks ago. And I tried my best to create a real thorough roles and responsibilities sheet. It's 1 page, but it's basically expectations on here's what you do from start of your day to the end of the day, every day. And then I spend about 2 to 3 hours with him every day between the field, some time in the field, some time in the office, and just basically saying, hey, here's how I've always done it. Here's how I ran projects when I ran projects by myself. And then, after about 5 weeks now or so, I've kind of just cut him loose and just said, hey, now sink or swim. So go kind of, you don't have to do everything the exact way that I've always done it. I'm just showing you and guiding you the way that I've done it. If you've got your own ideas, please feel free to implement them, as long as, it's not detrimental to the company or the jobs. And he's really taken off and really taken on kind of almost more than I thought he would be able to at this stage, and really running with it. And we communicate every day still, and I help him with the questions and issues he's got. But really, for the most part, he's doing great, and he's kind of running with everything I've taught him. And he has his own experience as well. So
nice. So what was the main thing that transitioned him from one to the other, where you say he's like running it on his own? Was it just putting him in the driver's seat?
Yeah, Pretty much just stopping those 2 to 3 hour meetings every day and just saying, okay, we'll talk as needed on an as needed basis. We meet Monday mornings, run through the projects for the week and the work for the week and the next couple of weeks, but then it's about it. He's on his own, and he reaches out with questions, and
Yep.
you know, through whether it's through our line app that we communicate through, phone calls, whatever.
Yeah, that's big. I think it's really valuable to do that upfront input, like you did, like a heavier investment on the front end to retrain somebody in the way of this is how insert name of business does our work, right? Regardless of whatever background you've come from, you know, so on and so forth. This is how we do it, and doing that in like a formal meeting set point rather than like the as ad hoc, like as it comes up throughout the week, making that a different time that's set apart causes it to sink in differently. But then, yeah, if you, it's very common for a lot of business owners, small business owners in particular, to really get in this rhythm of being a bottleneck without realizing it because they're making full comprehensive checklists for their people.
Mhm.
You're taking away the need and the responsibility for them to use their brains, but you've hired them for their brain and for what they can do, you know, in the physical space. So yeah, those 2 hours every day meetings, giving them a full comprehensive checklist. Hey, here's what you're doing all the way through. No. Do away with that. Start doing at most a weekly meeting. And then as they reach out, they can ask you questions. But something that I do as well, or encourage guys as well to do, Fletcher, is when they start to ask the questions midweek as well, it's all about empowering your team to believe in the choices that they're making as well. So you may have the answer and it may be immediate and it may be a little bit quicker for you at that moment to say, blah, 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 here's the answer of what you need to do. But training yourself to first respond with a question, you know, hey, I've got help for you, but first, what have you tried already? What do you think we should do? Is a way to long term, right? It's a little bit more time involved on the front end, but long term, it teaches them to continue to think for themselves. And you're able to empower them, you know, say, yep, absolutely, that's what I would do. When you start with that, if they get it right, and then correct it where it's wrong. But that'd be a second thing. So yeah, upfront
Yeah.
investment a little bit more, and then kind of weaning that off with time.
Yeah.
But it's
Yeah.
always
Yeah.
consistent.
Yeah, absolutely. I think too, and I'm glad you mentioned that, Bryce, because I'm a former teacher, former science teacher.
Hey,
So
my man.
doing nothing,
Oh my
doing nothing
gosh.
but answering questions is sort of my thing. And so I've been trying to tell myself, even though these
Yeah.
are adults, you know, some of them are older than me or younger than me, I need to still sort of tap into some of that teacher role to
Yeah.
empower them. And so I've definitely been doing a lot of that. So thank you for that affirmation, because I'm all like, I
Yeah.
hope I'm not making them feel small. But what I'm also interested in too is, are there some like formal leadership training? Like I've worked with educators and teachers. I've trained and coached teachers. I've trained and coached administrators before. But those are individuals who have sort of like come into a field and there's like this academic world and it's sort of like this formal way of doing things. Whereas what I'm doing, in a sense, a little informal, because I'm doing like something most contractors don't do. And I'm trying to find a way to really coach them into being good leaders so that they don't necessarily have to call me to say, oh, what should I do? I want them to have that intuitive thinking and problem solving and be able to delineate what they should do next and why they should do that next, and line it up with, I guess, our plans or our goals that we have for a project or for the company overall. So do you guys have like formal leadership things that you all do? Like, how do you train your leaders to be good leaders?
Yeah. I think, Fletcher, one, the intention that you have behind this is great. You know, you're wanting to invest in your team, you're wanting to build them up. I wouldn't overthink it too much. You don't need like a formal training or program or anything like that. I think a little goes a long way. Having that dedicated time each week where you're sitting down with them and you're saying, hey, what is working well? What isn't working? You know, where do you see areas that we need to improve? You know, empowering them when they come to you with problems to say, hey, what would you suggest, or what would you like to try, or what solutions have you thought of? You know, those types of conversations are really beneficial to their growth and allowing them to feel empowered to, hey, Fletcher values my opinion. You know, I'm not just another employee, but I'm somebody who he respects my opinion. I'm able to, contribute to the company and its growth. I would also have that dedicated time each day. That's not necessarily for growth ideas, but more so for putting out burning fires, answering questions. If they know that you have a dedicated time each week that you are investing in, or each day that you're going to have their undivided attention, they can get answers. It's going to help prevent the got-a-minute meetings throughout the day. And then I do think there's something worth once a month sitting down with them and saying, how are you? What goals do you have for you or your family? How can I help you reach those goals? I do think that if you have somebody who you're trying to build up as a leader, as a core person in your company, investing that time to say, how can I help you? What goals do you have? How can I help you achieve those goals? I know that I've had clients who have implemented Profit First with their companies, and then I've also helped employees implement Profit First in their lives, if they're struggling with debt or have certain goals, want to buy a house, whatever. And so I think having that dedicated time with them is very important. But don't overthink it. Having those set meetings is a great place to start. And then if you want to read a book as a team, that's something that we've done here multiple times at Redmond Growth. Leadership and Self-Deception would be a really good one that I would probably, say, hey, let's read this together, and once a week, let's talk about it,
Thank you. Yeah, I do think I sometimes overthink it. I'm sure I'm not the only one here, but coming from the academia world, everything is overthought. That's probably why I don't work here anymore. So that's one thing.
Yeah.
Very procedural. Yeah. Thank you. That's all I needed. Oh, the other question I had was about having an employee that may have had a checkered past. They're great so far. They've been with me for a week so far. Been great. They show up early, which is on time for me. They show up early. They happy to do the work. Customers like them. Their first day here, they got a tip from the customer. They have a really, really sketchy background that didn't reveal itself in our initial interview. How do you all do? I guess it's case by case, but what do you guys do when you have some in that situation, and how do you approach that employee?
Yeah, it's a really good, authentic question. I see, Dalen, you put something in the chat there. You want to expand on what you said?
I'm in the plumbing industry. This will be 16 years, 2.5 years owning a business. And I've worked with all shapes and forms, and some of the best ones were ones that did have a past, that had men in their life, because broken homes are typically a result of how a man ends up. He had no leadership to begin with. I was that. I found men in my field that were stand-up dudes. They may have had a past, but work straightened them out, and they straightened me out. And touching on your leadership, you just lead by actions. Let God lead you, and you'll lead everybody else in the right manner. I found that my guys have respect for me that I don't understand at times. I don't really know how to go at it other than that right there. That has taught me more than anything as far as leadership. The book of Proverbs is an amazing tool on how to handle yourself as a man. And back to the checkered past, everybody deserves a second chance. Thirds and fourths, the old fool me once.
Yeah.
You can't keep, that's insanity to keep on, but
right.
Second chance. If they stab you in the back, lesson learned. If they don't, you're helping them.
Yeah. I think that is wonderful advice. Anytime somebody has a checkered past or anything like that, I always just like, hey, just be candid, pull them aside, set expectations, say, hey, this is what I will tolerate and this is what I won't tolerate, and I love a good, where attaboy, where it's like, hey, this is what you're doing really, really well. This is why I so appreciate you. I want to see you succeed here. Here's what I can't tolerate. Here's what I can. And then if you feel something, say something, address the elephants in the room. They're not helping anybody by being there, but I totally agree that, it's okay to have somebody with a checkered past. You just got to make sure that you're setting those expectations and holding people accountable to it.
Yeah. I think I would add into that too, the write-up policy. So you have the attaboys. That's a more important part, but having both sides, right, where there's natural consequences to the actions that may or may not happen. And that takes the emotion out of the process as well. So I'm going to put a link to that in the chat real quick here. But the yeah, using a write-up policy like that. The other thing that I would say is be mindful with the thing that I get most worried about, and that I've seen people get in trouble with for the other person's sake as well as the business's sake, is pay advances. That's the number one thing that I would just be pretty strict about.
Don't do it.
Not doing it.
Mhm.
Like putting people on a continuous pay advance, that can be a really quick, steep, slippery slope. Maybe the very first time when they come in, there's like a transition period, right? If they had to cut off their past work. But other than that, doing payroll advances is just a really slippery, tricky slope that you don't want to get yourself too involved in. There are organizations that would be better to help that rather than your employer sometimes. And the more you can kind of keep some of those things separate, that'd be the one thing that I would make probably a hard line about up front, so you're not having to react to it when it comes up, if that's part of their past. Mr. Lineweaver, you got something here?
Yeah, I was just going to mention, yeah, those are really great comments. And yes, I agree. You know, not everybody. You know, sometimes we all have issues in our past that we had to learn from. Although I think one thing you want to try and do as much as you can is, if you know somebody's got some issues in a particular area, not that you make an example out of them by setting specific guardrails that makes it look like you're pointing them out, but at the same point in time, you also want to put some guardrails in there to kind of help them not be tempted to, you know, fall back into that same thing. And at the same point in time, be the leader and the example that they'd like to be, that they'd like to emulate. I mean, sometimes that's a little hard because sometimes we have to make some hard decisions in love, so to speak, with people in those kinds of situations. We used to have a prison ministry. We used to have to deal with a lot of people that had really bad pasts, including murder and you name it. But you know, we also have to, especially if we have God as the center of our business, we also have to try and model that as much as we can, being that Christ-like leader, and let God work in them. And this might be a season where there's a ministry there in this environment that God's going to help them grow to another level. So, you know, I just be encouraged. I would encourage you with that, but at the same point in time, you know, put some guardrails in place so that that temptation isn't there for them to hurt you. For example, like, it's just a simple analogy, but you know, leaving $100 on the table is, you know, a temptation for someone on the desk, you know, or whatever. So, you know, once they have proven faithful, and I learned this years ago through a whole lot of stuff, but to keep it real simple, you know, test people with small steps and see if they prove trustworthy. Don't give them trust on a large scale. Let them prove that they are worthy of the trust in the small steps, and you can give them some more steps and let them grow into that. And they prove that they are faithful step by step. And so that would be my recommendation and my thoughts on that for whatever they're worth. Thanks.
Yeah, I think that's great. I know I had a client a couple weeks ago call me, and one of their office help, they found out had a bit of a checker pass, but that office help's been around for a few months, been doing great work, and the checker pass was to deal with bank accounts, and they were kind of panicking, like, oh my gosh, what do we do? And it's like, well, we've not given her access to the bank account, so we don't plan to. So, you know, we're not going to give that temptation. And so as long as they're hitting the marks and they're being honorable in the work that we put them for, awesome. You know, if you have somebody who's been tempted with gas cards in the past, maybe they have to earn that gas card. You know, they have somebody else filling up their tank. And so I think that there's a lot to be said there, and especially with leading by example as well. So some great advice today. Love it. Okay, of course. What other questions do we have today?
Just a note on what Richard said there. Setting up guardrails. Boundaries are very important in workplace and personal life, and they can be tough sometimes with people that we are around every day to set up hard boundaries. But boundaries in themselves can be God sent, and we are to protect our four walls. So that's something that is huge in our world as leaders and employers, to set up those boundaries where our guys know where we stand, what we believe in, how we work, and how this machine moves, and have those set in stone. No room for stipulation, no room for interpretation. They are solid. You have a firm foundation of respect, boundaries, and morals. I think that it's a system set up for success. Granted, we will slip, especially in this curve, for the majority of us learning these things, but for the most part, we start there, and I think we'll be very fruitful.
Yeah, I think you're right. And the biggest thing with that too is that you actually follow through with whatever boundaries you set. That's the hardest thing, is not so much that people will break them, because they will, but that you will keep them as well. That's the same thing with the write-up policy. It means nothing to the team if you don't utilize it. Same thing with the working agreement to the customer side, right? If you don't express it, communicate it beforehand, so that you then have something to reference back to, so it doesn't seem like an emotional reaction. Well, I'm only saying this because this happened or that happened and this came up and now I'm thinking about this in this way, whatever. The more you can remove the emotion from it, set the expectations right from the get-go, and then it's with yourself, just staying firm with that. The same thing is true with the rocks calendar, right? If you tell people when you aren't available so that you can do certain things in your business, it's a self or a personal discipline almost more than other things. Mr. Bayless.
Yeah, I mean, Bryce, you kind of actually stole some of the words right out of my mouth. So, not to beat a dead horse, but just having set in stone non-negotiables and sticking to those is very key. I mean, obviously, I'm just a small little shop, just me and another guy, but I came from the big corporate world, and I had a big crew under me, and there was times where, man, he was a good tech, but you had to stand firm on what your beliefs and your standards were as an individual in the group, and it's also a company-wide deal. And I had to let go of a guy that was a up and coming apprentice journeyman. He was very good, but he got caught putting time to jobs that he wasn't there, and he was actually at home. And we weren't looking for that, but somehow that just unraveled, and unfortunately, I knew him since day one, and I actually hired him, and I had to let him go because it's like, hey, that's something we don't do. We don't lie, steal, or cheat around here, and we do a good, honest day's work, and unfortunately, you got to go. But like I said, you got to stand firm. Doesn't matter if it's a special high-end tech or whoever it is. It should be across the board for everybody. And then once you do that, everybody will respect your standards.
And I think that's a good premise, but also a double-edged sword, because where I cut my teeth at, Plum One, we had a boss that ran like that. He was hardcore old school, started plumbing in the 70s. Incredible plumber, incredible guy, but brimstone and fire. 6 o'clock's when you clock in, 6:01, you may get fired if he's feeling some type of way. If he comes out there and checks cards and you clocked in at 6:01, sent home for 3 days. And he did this in the retention rate because it scares guys. It scared guys. So the retention rate was terrible until he put his son kind of in a management position and realized that, hey, these new guys, like, you're old school. I was trained old school. That doesn't work with these new techs. These new techs are a totally different generation of people. They respond different, they're receptive in different manners, and learning that has kind of changed my outlook and standards. Because before, beat my chest and holler and scream, and that's not get what I want out of my apprentices when I was an employee. And now that doesn't work. They'll go sit in their phone or get their mama to come get them. It's such a different world now.
Yeah, making exceptions. There's some of that like favoritism that can happen in there where I think the key part in what you shared a second ago is if you felt some certain kind of way. If you didn't do it all the time, or if you did do it all the time, there may have been a bit of a difference in the perspective. But yeah, you're right. It's how you set the expectations, and empowering, enabling your team is that bigger part where we talked about with the training and developing your leaders. How can you say, yeah, that's the right thing? And we had those attaboys and those kudos like Nicole was talking about as well. But there's also real natural consequences. But yeah, I think making an example of a person really just is outdated as a philosophy. I don't think it works in any sort of way productively anymore. And if it ever did in the first place.
A cheat code I found out in a Bible study we had, I can't quote the verse exactly, but to love is to fulfill all commandments. And that thing hit me hard because it's true. And go at it with love. Even when you're fired up, mad at your guys, go at it in a calm, I hate to say stoic, but a calm, collected manner, to where when they do slip up, when there is something, talk to them in a manner where it's understanding, where you're still, I guess you're still the superior and you hold that ground, but they know that you're not just berating them and throwing the hammer at them. Granted, there are times where you have to, but for the most part, because I tried that initial in business, and one of my guys he's a young dude, but he has caught on and far surpassed what I expected. He doesn't respond well to the heaviness. He'll lock up. He won't talk to you. And when I did lose it, I realized that if I'd call him back and be like, "Hey, dude, that was me. What the actions you did were not receptive of how I just acted." He would dial in even harder. Like I would see progress from them because he saw, okay, he's not here just to be a butthole to me and to get what he wants out of me. He respects me. And from then the outburst on my end, because that's one thing I had to beat, was the anger and frustrations have gotten fewer and further between. And I've seen so much progress in my guys when they do mess up and they call me and I'm like, "Hey, what's going on? Let's talk through it," rather than, "Are you a freaking idiot?"
Yeah. That's big.
When you can truly come from it with as you said, the love, but like with their best interest at heart. Like it's not just if your primary motivation is frustration and anger because you wanted a thing to go a certain way, rather than, "Hey, this is good for you, regardless if you work for me for the rest of your life or not. This is for your good." But you can only do the apology situation as well so many times before that apology is meaningless. So it has to lead to actual change as a person to you as well.
Absolutely. So. And that's what you just said was what weighed on me, because my guy Logan, the sensitive guy, he one day I fired off on somebody on the phone and he was at the bottom of my ladder. We were in a hotel in the ceiling working on a water line, and he heard me and he said, "You need to call him back and apologize."
Woo! Sheesh.
I said, "I'm not calling him back and apologize. He's an idiot." And I got back in the ceiling and the conviction hit me. It was like the sword went all the way through me. And that's been probably 6 or 7 months ago. And that was the turning point in my fires, is having people, and even your guys, like I'm learning just like they're learning as a business owner. I tell them, "Hey, if you see a part I'm slipping as a leader," I don't like to say boss, as a leader, "tell me, and I will do everything I can to adjust that and to fix that in a manner that works for everybody." And it's huge.
It's a sign of good leadership when your employee feels like they can tell you that can say, "Hey, I think you need to apologize to him." Like that's a sign that they feel comfortable enough with you, or that you've created that culture of accountability, which is huge, to be able to establish. And something that leadership and self-deception that book really is centered around is whenever we're trying to solve a problem, trying to attack that person that the problem is coming from is not going to be productive. You don't want to feel like they can't feel like you are fighting against them. You want to feel like you're coming beside them to fight the problem. Like, you're not the problem, I'm not the problem, this is the problem. Let's come together to solve it. What do we need to do to not run into this anymore? And you're going to have a lot better of a conversation, a lot more productive. Richard, I see your hand up.
Yeah, I agree. I think, let me just say this. I mean, I'm to the point now as I'm getting older, where I fight sometimes the natural disposition to become a crotchety old geezer, like he was talking about a minute ago. Not that he's necessarily in this situation, but come on, really? How stupid can you be and still breathe, kind of a thing. You have a lot less patience for stupid when you get older. And I'm trying to learn, I'm working on this myself because I'll be 60 in a month, but I'm learning now when a situation hits me, instead of reacting immediately, which is easy to do, especially if you're in the middle of a whole bunch of other stuff. But if you can take a count to three, like one, okay, take a breath, count to three, like 1, 2, 3, and then respond. Okay, at least calm down a little bit so you don't just blow somebody's head off. And understanding too that, especially with younger guys, it's a little bit harder to do with older guys. But with younger guys, sometimes we end up being a little bit like a father in addition to being a boss. And sometimes we have to kind of have, even with our employees that are older too, but we have to kind of, have some firm boundaries. Like somebody was talking about with the love elements. Yes, and sometimes, we have to love them with some hard love, with some firm boundaries, because maybe they grew up with some dysfunction, and everybody's family has dysfunction, and there may be some dysfunction there in their past that is precipitating some of these things that they need to grow through. And so, that's sometimes that patience and love thing in leadership is something that they men have never seen modeled. I mean, I had a horrible stepdad situation. And the guy could make money, but I mean, it was, everything else was a disaster. And so I'm just saying, we a lot of times assume that when they come, they have this Leave It to Beaver background, and, as a kid, and they probably didn't. And so, again, as I was mentioning earlier, sometimes we're in a situation where God puts us in a place where we can help facilitate their growth and development. Again, we have to have guardrails and things in place so they can't hurt us. But at the same point in time, if we really want our business to be like a type of family culture where we all look out for each other, help each other, whatever, that needs to happen beyond just the business. And again, you have to have guardrails in there too, because some people will take that and abnormally use that against you. However, if you are, and I don't want to sound preachy, but if you are a Christian businessman, and I think I said this once before on the call, and I hate the word Christian business because if your business dies, it goes to bankruptcy court. It doesn't go to heaven. But yet, in that culture of trying to establish, God in your business and walking as a Christian businessman according to biblical principles, sometimes we have to take those steps and we have to model that. And the Bible talks about, and a lot of people don't spend a lot of time in the Old Testament, but the story of Nebuchadnezzar talks about how he had that vision that he was a tree. And we got to think sometimes our business is a tree that can benefit other people, not just salary, but their lifestyle, how they're going to grow, how they're going to become, we have the ability to influence that for all of our people. And so, and we can create a culture there where, we have an element there that they can connect with, because God is our, in our business, that is more than just business. Yes, okay, it's numbers. Yes, it's profit. I absolutely believe that. If your business isn't making a profit, then it's not a business. It's a, it's a public relations service. But yet, at the same point, I'm dealing now with, at 60 years old, God has been dealing with me a lot the last few months about legacy. And really, as we're getting older, we're training up the next generation. And, in your business, you're going to be training up the next generation of people to go beyond you. Maybe they'll have their own business. Maybe they'll just stay within your business. But, in 10 years, where do you want this person to be? How do you want these people to be? How do you want your culture of your business to be with these people? And so, some of those times it's kind of hard to think long term and big vision. But as we train people up, like I have a 3-year-old, I speak to my 3-year-old like he's a 5, 6, 7-year-old, because I want him to grow into that. I don't want to talk to him in 2-year-old, 3-year-old language. I want to talk to him in 5, 6, 7-year-old language so that he grows into that, because I talk to him in the language and the goal of where I want him to go, not where he's at. And I'm talking about us being fathers and creating legacy with our business that maybe become a multi-generational. I know on the call a few weeks ago, there was a lady or a guy, I guess, I think he and his wife were on the call, 4 generations of plumbers. I was like, wow,
that's
100-year-old.
Pierce Electric. Yeah, they've been around for, I think their birthday was on Saturday. I want to say like 92 years. And so talk about some pressure to carry on some legacy when your family's been electricians in Vallejo for that long. It's pretty neat. Just for sake of time here, Drew, your hands up been for a moment. Richard, though, you're powerful.
Oops, sorry.
You're good. Drew, I want to get to you here. What question do you have for us today?
Yeah, so I have a question, I guess somewhat related to the conversation we were having earlier, but we are in the process of trying to hire our first legitimate project manager. And I wanted to ask, we're just trying to figure out, like, we're in the really early stages, made a few good phone calls, going to get into kind of the next like interview round with a couple of guys, but we really don't have a set way we're planning on presenting, pay versus bonus structure, etc. So the question is to anybody, do you have a good pay structure and bonus structure that has worked well for you for a project manager?
I can't really speak on it personally, but I have friends that have had great retention. It sounds crazy, but one of the biggest things is a really nice truck. Not a work truck, but like a full trimmed out 4-wheel drive, half-ton or 3/4-ton pickup, something that's theirs while they work for you. They can use it anywhere they need to do, personal or for business. That's worth a lot of money. And the bonus structure that a good friend of mine uses is per job, kind of like your big PMs. You finish within budget, under budget, on time, before time. He's got a percentage base that is on top of his salary. It's a pretty padded salary. You just got to pay guys these days. We got to, as employers, we have to come out of pocket to retain good employees and buy our time back. I think that's a hard thing to get past, but we can't make all the money while we're building, and doing that makes them treat it like it's theirs. And having that performance, having that incentive at the end of it where they take it personal to, okay, we need to stay in here. They're auditing all the POs, anything that's going in and out. They're looking at that and paying attention to it on top of the timeline. and treat it like it's theirs. That's what I see. And my best friend, the reason I started a plumbing company, owns a tile business and a home remodeling business, and has great retention with that model.
Yeah, good feedback there, Dalen. Drew, if I could ask, did you mention what type of business you have, and also what role you're talking about, or is it everyone in general?
Yeah, it's so we run a construction and remodeling business, commercial and residential. And it's just a project manager. So someone, I mean, we're running anywhere between like 4 to 8 projects at a time. Some of them are really, really big. Some of them, aren't that big, but I mean, right now it's just me and my business partner, and we kind of tag team the project management, but we really need someone to come in and start running most of that for us. So, depending on how many jobs we have at the time, we're looking for someone to come in and really run all of the jobs we're working and kind of take, ownership on those. So I guess I'm just trying to, I guess my biggest concern is what is a good, especially, and again, take note, this is literally our first real employee that we'll have ever hired. What is, what's a good balance on a firm paycheck? I mean, whoever it'll be will be on 1099, but a base salary versus a good bonus, percentage split.
W2 them. Do not 1099 them. That's a bad system in my opinion, and I've seen it time and time again, especially in PMs. It adds another layer to them that they have to handle as far as workman's comp, insurances, their taxes, keeping up with that. I think that an employee would almost make a little less than have to deal with all those things.
Yeah, there's a couple of ways to play it. I've got some feedback for you, Drew, but Lance, you were one of the people I was thinking of. I know we did some work like this recently. I was going to see Jay as well, if you would speak up, but Lance, since you raised your hand, if you want to chime in here first.
Yeah, I was going to say, I mean, the project manager side really changed the game for us, hiring a designated person to just do that, not to layer on all these other responsibilities, not also a delivery driver and all those other things. He's, just really running the project from top to the bottom, change, one of the things that changed my life in this. But as far as pay structure goes, we pay them a salary, plus we have a bonus structure for keeping us on budget, projects being done on time or under budget. And so that's kind of our incentive to them. But they have a company vehicle. I'm not sure about the truck thing, because what if your project manager is a 5-foot-tall female? She may not appreciate a 3/4 ton diesel or something. But I'm just kidding. But yeah, we have a company vehicle and a gas card that they use, and so that is also kind of their incentive. But that's what's worked really well for us. The other thing too is talk to your coach about getting a clear job description for them written up, and they understand clearly what their duties and responsibilities are. If you haven't, that was also a huge game changer.
Nice. Yeah, thanks, Lance, for jumping in there. Yeah, I put a link in the chat to a document specifically for this project manager role. It does what it sounds like you're wanting to do, Drew, is to have a kind of a guaranteed livable minimum, but also incentivizing them based on their responsibilities and what they actually would do in the business. So that's what this is totally geared to do. This actually is something that I didn't jump into whenever Fletcher brought up his point about training leaders, but to an extent, if you make someone's compensation tied to their performance, naturally it makes sense that their performance would start to improve, or at least be focused on in a different way. So that project manager, like Lance said, has a description of how that person functions. And I think Lance is totally right. And I've had this conversation so many times with a lot of business owners, is having a person for the role rather than finding a person and then using them in every which way that they could possibly work for the business. Because one, you're not guaranteed that person forever. So if you ever have to replace them, well, then there's all these weird random things that then need to be replaced as well. And you're never going to find that unicorn puzzle piece again. But two, just because it allows them to really be focused in on what they're doing and really excel at that. Same thing is true for you as the business owner. The more you're able to delegate the tasks, take that hat off of your head as a specific role that then someone fills, more likely you don't have to reabsorb those responsibilities in part or as a whole any other time later. But yeah, so the structure of the document that I put in the chat, just to give a quick little understanding of it at least, is a base salary that they're then bonused against, if that makes sense. So what it's set up as is $1,000 a week as a weekly draw, regardless of the work, the projects that they've done, everything like that. But then the incentive structure is based on specific KPIs to that role, like Lance said, project on budget, on time, no callbacks or customer complaints or things like that. And it's parted out. So for the sake of time, I won't go too deep into it, other than just to say that minimum draw is $1,000 a week. And I think, Jay, you're running this system as well, where it's about $1,000 a week, a livable but not very comfortable salary, because we expect their bonuses to overtake that. When they complete projects and check that once a month, they're going to be monitoring their budgets a lot tighter because their compensation is tied to it. They're going to be managing their numbers and how people are working on each project a lot better. Again, because their compensation is more tied to it. But with that too, I think this was another point I wanted to mention, is bonuses that are applicable to everybody on the team make sense to do. Stuff that you really want to, I don't want to overuse the word incentivize, but you want to promote, I guess, is if they bring new work to the company that you didn't have to sell, that didn't come through one of your normal lead sources, a referral, bonus that, make it a set amount that everybody can be eligible for, regardless of their role in the company. If they refer an employee that then stays with you, or a subcontractor that you use on, 2 or more projects, have a set bonus for that as well, that anybody could earn at any time. That way your whole team is working towards your same goals. Same thing with Google reviews. Yeah, there's maybe more I can say, but is that getting on the right track, Drew, of what you were asking, or should we redirect here a little bit?
Yeah, no, that's on the right track. And I did, Nicole sent me this document, so I've already reviewed it, and that was going to be one of my follow-ons was if anyone is using kind of this draw structure versus, because before I looked at this, the thought in my mind was, set base pay no matter what, and then you get bonuses tied to the KPIs. But I thought this was an interesting way to kind of lay it out with the draw structure. So I was interested to see if anyone here actually uses this and has seen success with this.
Yeah, I think the only change you would make to this structure versus what you're initially thinking, Drew, is instead of it being that base rate against their bonuses, you'd be having a base rate plus their bonuses. What you would have to do for that is to lower that base rate, so it'd be less comfortable, because you can't do both unless you made the incentives a little bit smaller. So Lance just left the call, but he's one of those guys that is using this. He and I implemented this in his company, I would say maybe 6 months to a year ago. And then Jay, I know you're in the call, not to put you on the spot, but I know we've also implemented this, if you want to speak to it and kind of tell Drew how it's worked for you.
So far, it's working good for me. But I can't say it's 100% in place yet, so it's hard for me to give a judgment on it. But there's some tweaking I need to do. But other than that, the performance base does work good, and you can divide it on your KPIs, like whatever you expect for them to deliver. You just divide those numbers or points, based on that. I'm not sure if that helps, but yeah, the performance based incentives definitely do work well. It takes a lot off your plate, if you're giving it to somebody, because they take full responsibility at that.
Yeah. And I know you've specifically seen Umberto really go from sort of just like a taskmaster sort of project manager, or sorry, supervisor or lead crew member, into truly project managing a little bit after we started to implement it from what you've shared. But anybody else that's implemented something like this, or maybe even this one, that can speak to it? You may not get too many takers, Drew, since we're coming up against time here, unfortunately.
Yeah, I do have a follow on, but if we're out of time, it can wait.
No, go ahead.
So I guess okay, so we bring in a PM and his if we use this structure, okay, it's heavily incentivized based on the KPIs and performance. I mean, when you're talking about roles and responsibilities, like on board with what you're saying, we're not bringing in a PM to be like a jack of all trades for us. So we really want him to come in, and his main role is to improve efficiency, effectiveness in the field, project by project. But like I guess the question then would be like how heavily involved would you say they would need to be in like the estimating process and like the initial job walk, like really like building out the bid and the scope of work for the job? Because I mean that's something me and my business partner do, and definitely would it would have to take some time to completely offload that to a project manager. But I guess any any issues or concerns people have had with like you bring in a project manager whose pay is heavily tied to the scope of work and the estimate for the job that he didn't necessarily write. Does that question make sense?
Yeah. If the issue of the job profiting or him not hitting his KPIs is because you or Danny poorly estimated, you can't hold him accountable to that. But if your estimate is accurate and the job falls behind or he missed a change order or whatever, then that is on him. So he wouldn't be hitting his KPIs. And so you guys are responsible for estimating accurately. He is responsible for making sure that the job is following that estimate. And if it isn't, he needs to be communicating that to you guys so you can fix your estimating, or he needs to be communicating, or, the only other thing would be change orders that he would be responsible for getting. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes sense.
Yeah. I agree with that. I think Jay was going to raise his hand, but I'll say this as well. It's just about coordination. I wouldn't have those roles be one and the same. That's a big thing that Lance mentioned, because we had to work through it a lot. We tried doing a bit of a dual role for a while, and it just doesn't really work. Your guy's either going to be stronger at sales and neglect the project management side, or vice versa. And it just makes it really tough. So to me, it's more of kind of steps along the river, like you're doing stepping stones, where you're able to delegate off a certain task and a hat that you once wore into a role for somebody else. But the main thing is that every job needs to have a handoff meeting. As soon as you start, you can have a regular meeting like weekly to be able to do like an overview deal, but each job needs its own particular, from the estimator to the project manager. Here's the handoff. And if you can do that with the customer as well, that's even better. Just having a 30-minute meeting with them, with the project manager, to kind of intro them. And then you guys can do more offline, where you're doing more detailed, sort of a handoff there. But I would keep those separate.
Got it.
So, cool. All righty, folks. Well, we appreciate you guys being here. We got to jump off here and get out to our next meetings, and you guys got to get back out into the nitty gritty. But we'll end this call the same way we do every other time. So we want to have you unmute. We'll say growth on 3, and then carry on to the rest of the week with who's left. All right. Growth on 3. 1, 2, 3.
Grow.